And welcome back. What's up, folks? Hey, welcome to the Wednesday night show. Vic, here we are another day.
Hey.
Another day to do a show, to love the Lord, and to tell goofy jokes once in a while. How you doing?
Got that right. Yeah, man, 6 weeks in, if this was last season, we'd be done.
Yes, I know. I thought about that. And I'm like, what can I say to my team to inspire them? Come on, guys. We've only got 2 more weeks to go. I was thinking about that today, and I was like, okay, here we go, guys. We can make it. We can make it.
We got
Only
this.
2 more weeks, and we're doing great. So,
Yep.
folks, thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for sharing the channel, sharing the videos, all that stuff, giving us a thumbs up. Thanks for going to throughtheblack.com and buying our Ezekiel 8 apparel. Like how I did that? I just pulled it up out of nowhere. So you guys have been showing us a lot of love and, letting us know that you like the shirts. This is our The Gates of Hell Shall Not Prevail shirt. And we got some other ones on there too, like the I Will Fight for You. And hey, I forgot I'm wearing this one. It is Well With My Soul. But don't forget, there's movies, there's books, there's all kinds of stuff like that. So, and also coming up March 31st, April 1st, there's going to be a little conference called Out of the Darkness. And guys, you've heard us talk about this. It's going to be Greg Reed, Mike Spalding. Yes. It's going to be Coach Dave Daubenmire, Vicky Joy, Colleen James, Pastor Sean Carter. Hey, I heard Kenny C is going to be there. It's going to be a great time. The cool thing is about conferences is we get to hang out, and it just means a lot to meet people in person and to hang out with like-minded people. So we hope if you're in the area, if you're in Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, even Illinois, Michigan, it's a central location. One of these cities like Columbus or Indianapolis, Cincinnati, it's not far to go. You can come up from Tennessee. We got people coming from Oklahoma. We got people coming from California. So, yeah, come check it out. It's going to be a great time of fellowship, of teaching, preaching, and equipping and all that stuff. So, yeah, throughtheblack.com. You can go on there and click on there. You can find out the hotel information, all that stuff. But, Vic, hey, I am welcoming back a old friend. For me, a new friend for you. Do you know Mr. Chris Taylor?
I don't think we've ever met. I'm trying to think if some obscure conference. I don't think so. I think this is the first time.
You know what? Speaking of meeting, I came so close to meeting him last year.
Really?
And I was planning on finally going down to meet him in person, but it was actually the same day as the memorial service for Russ. And it was too far to go, and I was looking forward to seeing so many people down there. He was in Ohio. He made most of the distance, and I wasn't able to make it down to see him. But hey, we have him on the show today. Guys, his show is Don't Let Them Burn. Chris Taylor, come on in. And he's having some difficulties, so he couldn't get his camera to work, but here he is. You're there, right, Chris?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Chris, meet Vicky Joy, and Vicky Joy, meet Chris.
Hey, Vicky, nice to meet you.
You too.
All right.
So, Chris, one of the first things I want to ask you, when you live in Sin City, when you live in Las Vegas, do you like stock up like jugs of water because you're afraid the water's going to run out there? I mean, what's your advice to people that live here or are thinking about moving there? What would you say when it comes to water?
Well, I have a water filter, so that's how I don't buy bottled water that often. Ever since I've landed in Nevada, it's been a sort of a water issue, but I never worried about it. Some people do; they stock up a lot, but once you have a water filter, you're good. Unless the water power goes out. I haven't had any issues. I had a well when I first moved here.
Okay.
So then I moved after living 2 years in another county. I moved into Vegas, and I'm really not that concerned because I have different resources.
Sure. What about, is there any kind of sense, because we've been off and on kind of covering what's going on out there with Lake Mead and and the water coming down the Colorado River. Is there a concern out there among your fellow Vegasites, or is this they got it under control?
Well, the people that I'm around, they're very, very, very alert to everything going on in my church and everything. And those are the people I usually hang around with, and no one's talking about it.
Hmm.
Well, that's good news.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, yeah, they don't run out. I do know that it goes up and it goes down. It went up, but now it's going back down.
Yeah.
But maybe I shouldn't have said anything because you guys are not talking about it.
Well, we've always siphoned off water to California and other places,
Yeah,
but for some reason it just really dipped. I don't know if that's geoengineering or whatever. I don't know. Can't put my finger on it.
right. Well, and it seems like it's a combination of things. Like the number of people living in Las Vegas now compared to 100 years ago is a lot more. So
Oh
you guys
yeah.
are using a lot more water for
Oh
one thing.
yes. Yes. There's a
So
lot of Californians moving here.
yeah.
It's,
So Chris, man, we've had some epic shows in the past. And right now today, I'm introducing you to a new audience. Okay. If somebody else has heard you on here before, then they know what you're about. But I want to kind of jump into it. And I mean, you talk a lot. I mean, we've talked about the AI, we talked about just the comic books and the superheroes and just all of this mythology and how relevant it is, okay, to biblical things, to demonic entities and things that are happening out there. Can we just kind of jump into it and you just share with us like what's new? Because it's been a while since we talked about this stuff.
mm-hmm. Yeah, but first let me let the audience understand that I'm not, this guy that's gonna just jump on and hammer the comic book industry and the movies you watch and be all legalistic. Don't watch this, don't watch that. I'm just giving you some of the ingredients that you probably don't know about. And I came up in the 70s and 80s reading comic books. I didn't think anything was evil about it. There was a time in the 80s I went to my junior high teacher, had some Marvel book or whatever, and it had this spread of a big demon sitting in a chair. At that time, I didn't know what all this stuff was. So I asked him, and he said, you shouldn't read that. It's totally satanic. And I took that advice and I put it down, and I couldn't even tell you which comic book it was, honestly. But from there, I guess my senses were alert to it because, I was being churched and everything, but I didn't really know that much about, salvation through Jesus and all this stuff. So I was just a regular heathen, But after, around the year 2000, I started seeing all these comic book movies starting to become a little popular. But at the same time, I'm learning about the New Age. I'm learning about the Kabbalah stuff and other. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, Aleister Crowley and all these people. What's all this crazy stuff? And then you go back to the 70s, and it's all kind of coming to a crescendo here in the since 2015 and up. And one time I said to one of my family members, I said, I think this superhero stuff is a part of this whole great awakening in the sense of the New Age. It's a part of the New Age. And then I read about Aleister Crowley in a book called Our Gods Wear Spandex. And the person that wrote that book, as far as I know, is not a Christian. I don't know. But they wrote about how Crowley died right before the age of the superhero really took hold, before the golden age. And he was looking for this rise of the Superman or the Ubermensch based on his visitation by a spirit that called itself Horus, and another one called Aiwass. So from there, I started to see things, and I was studying also aspects about Hinduism, Buddhism, the martial arts, and all this stuff, and how it all connects. And then I started, it started to really become real that a lot of it is just deception. But one thing I like to say also is we're born in a pagan world. There's no doubt about that. And God through Jesus Christ pulls us out of this pagan world. So I don't, when we mention some of this stuff, don't be shocked that it's there. We live in a pagan world. Pagan people are going to do what pagan people do. We were once pagan.
Chris, I'm so glad you started right there, because this was one of my thoughts of what I wanted to ask you is, how did you get into all this stuff? So you just mentioned, okay, when you were a teenager, you had a teacher explain to you, hey, this is demonic. So how many years before then, and then, what you're doing now, like as far as you really start the deep research and you make these connections, okay? You know a lot about comic books, and that's a great tool to be able to help you just kind of lay it all out and expose all this stuff.
Right. So like I said, I was born in 72. Okay. So when I came to Jamaica I was born in Jamaica. I came to America in around 76 or something around there. Right. And the first thing I saw was the Hindenburg disaster, which kind of terrified me. And then they sat me in front of TV watching Star Trek and Shana Na and all these great programs at the time, right? And Doctor Who's creeped me out with the tunnel in the start of the show. I'm like, what is this? Right?
Yes.
I'm a kid. I don't know what. No one's explaining anything to me either. So from there, I was always kind of hooked to sci-fi themes. Godzilla, Star Trek, Star Wars, and I didn't get to.
What about the $6 Million Man? Did you watch that show?
Oh yeah, $6 Million Man, Automan. Remember that?
Yes. I remember that.
Yeah, all these shows that 80s was the greatest. Then by the time I got into a little bit before high school, Transformers, G.I. Joe, all these great programs, He-Man, which is also based in the occult, but whatever. So it really took my brothers, when they came from Jamaica in the late 80s, they are the ones that actually gave me the gospel. At that time, we were into trying to I kind of read some of the book of Revelation, and then we were also kind of teetering on Nostradamus, but my brothers were like, no, Jesus is the only way, da 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 da. And then from there I accepted Christ.
So Chris, let me take just a slight rabbit trail real quick. Being from Jamaica, was there any influence or any family members that were involved in Rastafarianism?
Not offhand, but it was in the culture. So they listened to the reggae music, and that was totally Rastafarian.
Right. Okay.
And so, but you would also hear about some of the occult stuff, like the Obia, which in other places it's called Santeria or whatever, right? Same voodoo stuff. You would hear about that, and then you hear about the Duppy, which is in our term we would say ghost, but it would be like a ghost that if you don't treat the body and right before they enter a certain place, they would start wandering. The spirit would start wandering. That's a Duppy. And then you'd also hear about something called a rolling calf. Supposedly there's some spiritual bull that rides through the countryside, and sometimes it has chains on it, and it would sometimes you hear it on the rooftop or whatever. It's just demonic activity, but that's the legend.
Wow, that's crazy. Have you ever heard of ghost mice?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
I don't know what's going on. Sorry. And my co-host is like, this is just making me think of this, because I've set some mouse traps up here in my house, and I don't know how they're doing it, Chris, but they are taking all of the peanut butter off of that hair trigger switch and not setting off the trap. I can barely set the trap and set it down without getting snapped. And I don't know how they're doing this. And I'm like, something supernatural is happening here. But anyway, sorry, a lot of rabbit trails a day. I want to hear just how you got into this in your story. But
so okay, so that was high schoolish. Okay, so in between junior high, actually in between elementary and high school, my mother would work all the time as a live-in nurse, and I would see her, but not as often as I should. and there would be these gaps in times. And I also became a diabetic, so I had to start taking care of myself and all this stuff. So I'd hang out with friends, but not much. And I was able to watch a lot of stuff on cable TV that I shouldn't have. Like, what's that show called? Excalibur. You ever seen the movie Excalibur from the 80s? It was very adult. Okay. I would watch that show over and over and over again. There was one with the kid that met the dragon. You know what I'm talking about. There's a white dragon. It looks like a dog.
Oh, you're talking about the Never-Ending Story.
Never-Ending Story. I was watching that over. I didn't know. I even had an inclination that I don't know how I knew it was New Age, but I knew it was New Age. And I was a kid. But you see all these commercials on TV about Dianetics, L. Ron Hubbard, and all these weird things. That was what was exploding in the 80s. Because from the 60s and 70s, we got the yoga, the Hinduism, but it didn't really explode until like around the 90s, coming up to the 2000s. But back in the 80s, there was it was going on with Merv Griffin and some of these talk show hosts at the time. So I had all of these multiple things coming into my life through entertainment, and that's why I focused so hard on entertainment, because I lived it, right? And so by the 80s now, I'm in high school and watching all sorts of stuff from Freddy, Jason, and all that stuff, Terminator, blah blah blah. And I got into the X-Men comics. I already knew about Captain America and all that stuff. I would see stuff. They even had a live action DC universe at the time. And it was short-lived. I remember watching Aquaman. Well, they didn't call him Aquaman. It was something else they called him. The guy from Dallas, I can't remember the actor's name. He was playing this guy that was just like Aquaman. So that stuff started coming to my hemisphere. But the X-Men comics was it for me. I didn't buy Superman comics, none of that stuff. It was always X-Men. And so that at that time, this was late 80s, early 90s. Jim Lee was my favorite artist. And I also, you don't know this about me, but I also started my own comic books. Not they weren't published, but I started drawing like crazy because I wanted to work for Marvel. And so that's how the whole comic book thing stayed. I wrote my own comic books. I even had stuff like I had my own Transformers comic books. I was biting Transformers, and from there I would draw stuff for people in high school, making money off that. And but then I started getting to rap, so that's where I got derailed. I wanted to become a rapper, so I started practicing that, and then I went to college for graphic design, dropped out the first year, and continued trying to rap. And then it's a long story. So, but I tell you what, as far as research goes, I used to watch Jack Van Impe Presents. I would learn about the Preacher Rapture and all this other stuff, and that started another foundation for me. So by the time I had a child, 1999, I built up some research. I already knew about the New World Order from 1994 because there was a book that came out at the time called The New World Order, and some of the rappers were rapping about it. And so by the year 2000 now, I'm on Alex Jones stuff. I'm like, oh my goodness, all this stuff. Wow, this is going on. Oh, Bush, gay. Oh my gosh. And so at that time, I started getting into bootlegging. So I used to do my thing in the streets. I'm still rapping. I'm starting a magazine company. By 2005, 6, the NFL is about to promote us and sponsor us. Sony was about to sponsor us. I had a huge mixtape following in Florida, but 2004, God had called me back, and let's just say I could have done away with some people in the worst way. I could have been in jail, prison. And he called me back. I didn't do what I was going to do. And so I didn't get out of the whole entertainment thing until about 2006, right when everything was about to take off. There was some company was about to fly us out to California, all expenses paid, we had no demo. No demo. They were about to fly us out, do all these shows, and probably even sign us. I can't even remember the name of the company. So anyway, I dropped it all, every single part of it. And from there, I moved back in with my mother and started researching the Bible, where did it come from, and all this stuff. That's where the real journey began. And so now we're here where we are.
Wow. I think there's going to be so many people listening that can identify with certain things, that you're mentioning, and that, interest that you had. Definitely the 80s were such an iconic, and all three of us, that was the time that we grew up, and probably that we were most influenced by the TV shows, by the pop, the culture. We were just talking about on another show, just some of the things that were just like normal to us. And I don't know what you saw or whatever, but we were talking about shows like All in the Family and Jeffersons, which would not be allowed today. Or, I loved Sanford and Son. These were the shows that we watched. The Dukes of Hazzard, right? The Incredible Hulk. So it was such a great time for entertainment in a way. Now, when I grew up watching that, my grandparents, who were conservative Christians, they were like, "Oh man, this is not good for you," right?
Yeah.
But that compared to what's going on today is a totally different world, right? We look at that kind of, we look back and say, "Wow, that was not that bad at all." That was back when TV was decent and innocent, right?
Mild.
Yeah.
The funny thing about Hollywood is that from its inception, it had spiritism in it. Again, we're living in a pagan world. Shouldn't be surprised at that.
Right.
But it's so masked that we are surprised. You don't realize how much of the occult was there in movies like Metropolis. It was about artificial intelligence that was brought to life through witchcraft. Some of the stars, they practiced this stuff, that back then in the 20s and whatnot. And so it led on through now. But I think right now, I don't want to get a sidetrack to the political, but what's happening right now, I'll just say this. This is very important for me to say. What's happening right now is not a communist invasion. It's not a Marxist invasion. It's not what anyone really thinks, because they're not defining it right. It's a satanic Luciferian invasion. Karl Marx did not make up communism. It started with Plato, and it bounced around to other leaders as history went on. Then he got a hold of it. And then from there, we lost millions and millions of people. So what's happening right now is a total Marxist invasion in our whole entertainment system, which is leading to what's called technocracy. That's the real culprit right there, outside of the term Satanism, right? Because as you could see through all of this stuff that we're dealing with, without mentioning it, you know what I'm talking about, it's a technocratic takeover through a Nazi regime called the WEF. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Chris, it's amazing. I want to mention a couple things here real quick. I was earlier today, I was scrolling through social media, and I'm a part of this local page. I live in Mansfield, Ohio. And they had a thing where it was all this black and white, really scratchy looking footage where they had these celebrities come to my town. And it was back in the 40s, I think. And I think it was Clark Gable was one of the celebrities. And I was like, well, what's going on? They were up there asking the people to buy war bonds. Okay. So they were shilling for the government, to pay for their war, right? And it was crazy. I'm like, wow, the government always did this manipulation type of thing.
Absolutely. And what do you see now? What's the shill now?
Yeah.
The yellow and blue flag. You know what I'm saying? That yellow and blue flag everywhere. And people are donating millions of dollars to this thing. I'm like, you're just giving to the doggone people that are trafficking.
Yes.
Laundering money. Like, how can you be so gullible? But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, Chris, I think it's interesting, fascinating, actually, when you look at the comic book and the gaming industry in particular. And I've heard that the video game industry has surpassed Hollywood by way of, you know,
Oh,
money
yes.
in the
Yes.
billions. And I mean, we know all sorts of new age, new world order stuff going through the storylines of those video games, Assassin's Creed, it's all
Mm,
this kind of stuff. But what's interesting to me is with video games and comic books in particular, this is not just people are fans. That people are reaching fanaticism levels to the point where they're losing jobs, they're losing their families. I remember a few years ago, the number one cause of divorce in the UK was Minecraft
wow.
because these guys were playing so much. And uh, there's got to be some sort of a spiritual element to this where people are literally letting their entire lives slip through their fingers because they've got to stay home and play these games or collect these comic books or what is going on with this worship almost that's taking place with comic books and video games in particular?
Okay, so before I answer the question directly, let's backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
You know how you see certain movies today or whatever you're reading, and you're like, how do they know that? How do they know that we would become like this or that, or we'd have these phones or these video cameras and then no. Okay, go back and look at H.G. Wells' stuff. He had a book called The New World Order. Okay.
Hmm.
And he was a hardened communist. I'm pausing so it could take effect. He was a hardened communist,
Hmm.
and the communists didn't make up technocracy. That started in the 20s and 30s as well. But what you'll see is a lot of these ideas came out of think tanks, and they put these things into the population to lead us. But who's leading them?
Hmm.
More than likely demons, right?
Hmm.
Whether
Hmm.
or not. And so as we move forward in our generation now, we would have seen stuff like Sylvester Stallone movies like Running Man and all these movies that came out in the 80s. And by the time we hit like around late 90s, early 2000s, we're like, whoa, this was in that movie. Well, that stuff was also in the sci-fi books back in the 20s and 30s. And now it just came full circle in a sense because the population accepted it. And then what we did in our imaginations was duplicated because we are duplicators. It's like when a child sees the mother and the father, they're emulating them, right?
Yeah.
And so we emulate others too, even in our entertainment. Like I said before, I was reading X-Men comic. I wanted to become a Marvel writer, or illustrator. And so what these people are doing because they don't know better. I'll start off with comic books. They're not realizing that most comic book characters, if not all, but I'll just say most, are pagan gods. And if you go back and look at, I believe it's Greece, they also dressed up as their gods. And so
Mm.
the cosplayers, they're doing the exact same thing. They might
Oh,
not think they're worshiping, but they are. All you have to do is look up a cursory look at the definition of worship, and you'll see what I'm saying.
mm.
It's not always just praying 5 times a day. You're emulating those gods. You're giving your all, your money, your affection to this thing. You are worshiping it. You know.
Yep.
And I fell into this thing. I'll tell you something I don't say often on my show. In fact, I'm writing a book right now, and I mentioned this in there. So when Man of Steel came out, I think it was 2013. I was like, wow, I love Zack Snyder's visual effects. I'm not too keen on the storytelling, but I love the visual effects, and the trailers for Man of Steel was awesome. And for those that don't know, that's another version of Superman. And I went to see the movie in an IMAX theater. And in Florida, we have some massive IMAX theaters. Okay, I mean, like you have to, if you're sitting in the wrong seat, you're going to be looking left and right like crazy because it's so big. right? And so I went to see the movie, liked it. The audience, I could tell they were split, but I didn't care. I liked the movie. And I went to see it 3 or 4 times in an IMAX theater.
Mm.
Right? So you could say I spent at that time maybe about $70, right? And so I got all excited about this thing. And I picked up my iPhone and I said, I'm gonna put on Facebook, Man of Steel was so awesome. You know what happened? And I'm not making this up. It's like God just punched me in the spirit and said, Are you telling them about me?
Oh.
And I'm like, okay, and I never posted it, So basically, my affection, my worship was given to this movie,
Mm. Mm.
and all that money on something that means nothing, really, So fanaticism, it's becoming commonplace because of the nature of our culture, the nature of our cult. We worship the stars. We worship the characters. We get all entangled in these video games. I used to be so heavy into Call of Duty. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying I don't play anymore or anything like that. I'm just not addicted. Okay. So I was on PlayStation. We had millions of people on there playing Call of Duty. The one I was most addicted to was World at War and Modern Warfare 2. And I was number 500 out of millions of people.
Wow.
I was playing this thing day and night.
Oof.
And if my friends were sleeping, I was playing, And I would get a couple of hours of sleep, get back up, pick up a bagel, get right back to it, And so I understand people are being deceived. They're burning their time. They're breaking up relationships. They're spending their money that could be going towards their savings. They're putting it. I mean, you have streamers out there right now that are making millions of dollars just sitting in front of the computer playing a game. And when I first saw it, I was like, man, this is ridiculous. And then when I'm researching the new games, I sit there and watch them play. It's not as ridiculous as it seems, right? Because everyone wants to. We're all searching for information. And even now, like talk radio, talk YouTube, whatever you want to call it, it's popular because people are searching for information. Mm-hmm. Not everybody wants to sit and watch maybe an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour video, but if the information, if the content is good, we'll watch it.
Yeah.
Right. So you have people that were playing Pokemon Go when it first came out.
Yeah.
And many of them were dying because they were looking for these Pokemon, these demons, in all sorts of places, and they would fall off a cliff or get hit by a car.
I remember that, yeah.
Somebody them, whatever it is, So I think we're just in a place where we're not as smart as we think we are.
Yeah.
Our schools have been dumbed down. Our families have been dumbed down and broken up.
Yeah.
So I mean, I grew up alone. My brothers were left in Jamaica. My mom was usually working. So when I'm getting into these circles, the modern circles of online activity, I'm probably filling a hole there. Mm. I'm socializing with people I would have never socialized with before.
Right.
We keep going back and going back and going back, especially with since we can talk online with people now. When I first started playing video games many years ago, but the first time I had a group setting was when I had the Nintendo 64 and GoldenEye 007 came out at the time, and it would be only 4 players on a TV, right? And we would play, let's just say 8 o'clock all the way to 5 in the morning. Mm. So that's localized. So imagine you're online with thousands of players.
Yeah.
Some people don't even take showers. There are people dying at their desks in certain countries. They have these video game parlors, and they're dying in there because they're getting blood clots, or they're not eating. There's all sorts of stuff going on with video games. But you're right. the video game market, it eclipses Hollywood and the music industry combined.
Oh.
Yeah, gaming industry is what it is.
You know what
The one thing that saved me from being addicted to video games is I was never any good at them. So I tried, and then I would get frustrated that I couldn't beat it, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm done. I give up.
You need like 13 fingers to
Yeah.
like. I remember like in television days where you like push a button and you were good. You know.
Yeah,
I had a neighbor that had ColecoVision. I think it was what it was called.
You must have been right.
yeah,
We love that, but
yeah.
You know
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say this is what I think is fascinating, and everyone gets all nervous when Tom and I start bringing up the patriarchy. But you know, we have really suppressed men's ability to be men, because then there's all these names that you give men if they're acting like a guy, and so I feel like a lot of these guys, there's a correlation between this draw towards these superhero movies. The demand, I think, is there because now you've got these men who are the epitome of strength and testosterone, and they're out there and they're saving the world and they're fighting for the people that are weak. And there's a craving for that because men aren't really allowed to be that in real life anymore. And so they're vicariously fulfilling that desire by playing it through a video game. And, meanwhile, we're giving courage awards and we're calling people heroes that have done nothing heroic, because if you actually really were a hero, you would be ripped to shreds for being, a macho man. And I really think that I wonder if the demand for these movies and video games would go down if we just kind of let men live out the desire to be strong and chivalrous.
Absolutely. I mean, going back to the family again, the foundations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you go back to Genesis, God made that man to do work and be responsible, and he dropped the ball. Then we had the fall, right? Yep. And from there, we have great examples of godly men and all this other stuff. But with all these broken families, most of the men are not in the family. The plague in America is fatherlessness. And since I didn't have a foundation, but I had enough, since it was the 80s, we had enough father figures and good examples on TV that kind of, helped to educate me on how to be a man and whatnot, so I didn't fall into the category of the deadbeat dad and all this other stuff, right? But today's society, I believe, starting with the late 80s newborns, let's put it that way. What do they call millennials or something?
You know what? All I know is the baby boomers. That's the only one I can get right because that's my dad's generation.
We're all Gen X. So.
Yeah.
So all right. So right after that,
millennials, I guess is the ones after us.
Yeah.
The cycle got worse. We have. I don't like to kind of separate things to black and white because we're all just brown, different shades of brown. But let's just use the term for now. In the black community, we murder each other constantly and we promote it. But the media uses the false narratives out there, whether it's Ferguson or something else, to get the black community angry at something. They're missing what they should be angry at. They should be angry at abortion. They should be angry that we're killing each other. They should be angry that we're a lot of us are not educated right. I didn't go to a school that was giving out A's and B's. It was like a C type of school. So they didn't educate us good. I had to educate myself after high school. So these things combine, and then the fatherlessness, the promotion of immorality everywhere now. I'm talking about everyone now.
Everyone.
It's gotten to epidemic proportions. And so with that, you go back to the male role, right? Okay, as far as the superheroes go, they have some good stuff in there, whatever. But there are people today writing more satanic storylines.
Yeah.
But all of these heroes are a replacement for Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Because he's the savior. He's the only one that could take us out of this godforsaken world, just, lack of a better term. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because people don't understand the fallen nature. What the secularists, they call it the human condition. And so here comes Superman, here comes the Hulk, and all these characters to look up to. They even neutered Captain America, who is supposed to be the more Christian type, wholesome character. They make fun of him. He's a virgin. Oh, ha, 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 ha. Did he sleep with this person? Blah blah blah. And then right now they're using the feminist agenda, which goes back to Marxism anyway, and communism, to neuter all of the strong villains and heroes.
Mhm.
And what they call it, the MCU, they are
Mhm.
replacing all the male characters with females. And they could beat up anybody. They don't have to work for their power. They don't go on the hero's journey.
Mhm.
They're just good. And one thing I like to point out, as far as these heroes and how they get their abilities, I've watched enough shows now to kind of see the pattern where it's, how in satanic ritual abuse, they'll abuse a person and to bring up a spirit or whatnot.
Mhm.
And it's the same issue here. They're going through they have to be stressed out
Oh.
to gain this power, this occult power.
Hmm.
Either they're getting bullied, or they have an accident, or a family member dies. It has to be a stressful occasion. And I said, this sounds just like what Tom and them talk about. It's like the MK Ultra type satanic ritual abuse, but put in a comic book form.
Yeah.
And the reason I can even say it confidently is because I know that these writers have to know something about the occult. They're too accurate with it, way too accurate with it. And
Chris,
so,
and also all of the super soldier stuff.
yes,
You know?
yes,
I mean, that goes way back to Captain America was the original super soldier.
yes.
And this is something that's just kind of coming in to the view of regular Americans, recently. But the comic books have been talking about this for a long time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, oh man, this is just like a primer here, because the stuff I can go into some other deep stuff, but I'll refrain for now. When it comes to looking up to these gods, like say for instance, Arrow, that's Apollo, and the guy from Marvel, Hawkeye, that's the same character. What happened is these guys, Jack Kirby and the rest, some of them were working for DC, then they'll go for Marvel, then back to DC. So what they'll do is they'll take this program from over here at DC, bring it to Marvel, rebrand it. But it's just the same thing. It's like, okay, you have Shazam, who his original name is Captain Marvel, man, right? And
Right.
so Captain Marvel it was a man in Marvel universe. Then they rebranded it and made it, I believe it was a black woman, and then it became Caucasian, which that's the interpretation now. But what's the real foundation of that? A character in the pantheon called Inanna, right? Inanna is the first. We would call her the first gender bender, because when she went to another culture, she would be a man. In another culture, she'd be a woman, and you know how it goes. Or she's a half man, half woman. Or sorry, that's right too. But either that or a half animal, half humanoid, right? And also she's Ishtar, she's Wonder Woman, and a bunch of other characters.
Aphrodite.
So Aphrodite, in the Bible, oh my gosh, she in the Ephesians.
Yeah, the Corinthians worshipped her.
Yeah, what's her name? Oh, it starts with an A, I believe. Artemis.
Okay.
Artemis, yes. Then you look at Thor. Thor is the storm god. The Bible tells us that Satan is the prince and the power of the air. And guess who's also that? Baal,
Baal, some God.
storm god, right? And so Marvel took the legend of Thor and kind of neutered it a little bit, and then put it out. They start bringing these pantheons of gods in all over the place. They're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
some are apparent, some are you have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Chris, I grew up with my grandparents, and from a really semi-strict, conservative Christian background.
Yeah.
And they were less strict on me as a grandchild, and than they were on my mom and my aunt. But I remember I used to watch this show called Voltron.
Oh yeah.
And on Voltron, there was this witch that made these beasts called Robies. And my grandpa would come and watch it with me after school. And I'm like, he's like mellowed so much, I mean, he's like totally against witches and all this stuff. But he's like, oh man, I want somebody to beat that witch, and like it's just so funny, we see the compromise, because when I was real little, my grandfather when somebody was on TV said a cuss word, they would shut the TV off. They're like, you're not watching that program,
Yeah.
And then kind of the compromise, but and we, it's happened over the years, but I'm just thinking about all of these different things, and that's one of the things that popped in was just that show Voltron and that witch on there.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
What about Thundercats?
Yes.
Right? You have these animal gods, right? That fell from the stars, right? And the Lionel uses the sword of what? Omens. The all-seeing eye.
Oh man.
But the villain, the Dark Mumra, the Egyptian mummy god or whatever, he's the bad guy, not the guy that uses the all-seeing eye.
Yeah, right.
Like two sides of the same coin, right? I used to love watching that show.
Oh yeah, no.
So I'm curious. I'm curious if Chris knows anything about Pulsar Man.
I know about it, but I don't think I ever really watched it like that.
Well,
I wasn't.
I
into,
am the
I wasn't
an ongoing joke on this show, because one year when I was a kid, they were all out of Superman costumes, and I got stuck with a Pulsar Man. Costume. So anyway,
yeah, I wasn't even a big Power Ranger fan, and it was Voltron for me. Power Rangers was corny for me, that Transformers and whatnot. But let's talk about Transformers for a minute, since it did have its own comic book. Now, the original Transformers was made up in Japan, and an American person or company bought it, and then they started to do their thing. So I'm not sure if where I'm going with this is a part of the original lore, but let's go to the Michael Bay movies. So in the beginning of the first Transformers movie, he said, before time began, there was the cube. And we know that's a whole nother rabbit trail of symbolism.
Yep.
But what they're saying is the cube is God.
and
And
Allspark, right?
the Allspark, and that goes into the Kabbalah, because the spark of divinity. And so it has a Gnostic overtone to the whole movie. You have these things falling from the sky like fallen angels, and Megatron, and this is where it gets a little sketchy, but follow me. Megatron sounds like Metatron, right?
Yep.
And Optimus Prime would be, because Metatron is like God, but the false God.
Right.
Optimus Prime would be more like Satan. It's flipped on his head. So you're always rooting for the bad guy.
Yeah.
Because Megatron is the one that brings wrath to the planet. The wrath of God.
Right.
As once you know the backgrounds of these false religions, you're like, oh, that's what it really means. Because even with the Thor mythology, it's Norse mythology, and they have the 9 realms and all this stuff. That's also in the Kabbalah.
Chris, do you
Yeah.
think that humans figured this out, or do you think it was more the demonic influence behind the humans that planned this out a little better?
I think a lot of it comes from the demonic religious activities. There was a movie I watched, The Man That Knew Infinity. You can watch it for yourself. And it was an Indian guy. It's a true story about a guy that became this mathematician out of India, and they brought him to some college in Europe, and his professor was an atheist. And by the middle of the movie somewhere, the atheist professor is warming up to the idea of a god, right? And so anyway, by the end of the movie, the guy's dying of cancer now, the mathematician dude from India. And he's like, so how did you, because what he was trying to do was get him to dumb down the equation for the normal human. We use his equations today. And I can't remember the guy's name, just gotta watch the movie. So anyway, he was like, how did you gain this, let's just call it talent? He said, one night or one day, my goddess came to me.
Wow.
Right? I mean, you got Warner Von Braun before he became a Christian. He was into all this occult stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Again, I said H.G. Wells. He was a communist. He was an atheist. All I hear when I hear atheism is Satanism. That's all I hear, because of the dying of the Godhead, right? And he put out all this stuff, including, the time machine and all these stories that we love from back then. And all of them led to somewhere that we shouldn't go. He was a racist too. You remember the Morlocks from the time machine?
Yeah.
Remember the people that on the ground were all dark skinned and the people were all white with blonde hair like the Vril? Remember that? Yeah. So a lot of even what's his name? Oh my gosh, it's one of these sci-fi writers. Very popular, man. Oh my gosh.
Older or newer?
Older.
You're not talking about
Bradbury?
Lovecraft.
He was also on that train. He was also a racist, a real racist, not the racist we talk about today. A real racist. And he would put that stuff in his book, but his stuff was horrifying as well. I don't have proof that he was in contact with the spiritual realm, but I would assume it based on the stuff that he did,
He astral projected.
There we go. That's enough right there. So okay, so comic books. The guy Alan Moore. You want to look up some videos with that dude. He admits that writing a spell is literally to spell. Write the story. He wrote The Dark Knight. He wrote V for Vendetta, Watchmen, and a few other. The League of Extraordinary Men. He wrote that, and he puts all of this occult stuff in these books. He even has an alien invasion, which we know what that is, right? That was in Watchmen, a big giant Lovecraftian squid that landed on the planet, right? They changed this for the movie, but So you have him, you have Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison admits that he went out and I can't remember if he smoked hash or peyote or whatever it was, and these beings visited him. And I think what he saw was in his mind, but I'm going to tell you what he said. They took him up and he saw, I think it was Alpha Centauri or Zeta Reticuli, I think Alpha Centauri. Anyway, and basically, they said, what we tell you, you put in the comic books. We're being led by spirits on so many levels.
Yeah.
And we're also going back to this Tower of Babel mentality, where it's the whole world has the hive mind voice, pretty much. And so all of these genres of entertainment, even though most people don't see it, it's leading us to one place, to worship the Antichrist.
Yep.
When we kind of look at this, going backwards, I think it's a lot easier to see when we get real close to it, or when we're emotionally connected to things. Okay. Right. When I was a kid, my dad took me in 1978 to see the movie Superman, the original Superman.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so cool. I want to be Superman, right? I'm 5 years old or whatever. And same thing with all the Star Wars movies and things like this. We even, I mean, there were warnings about these things. There were warnings about TVs, and preachers preached against TV, and there were shows back in the 60s like Bewitched, which was about a witch, and Vicky Joy and I were talking yesterday. A lot of people don't know that is kind of like a parallel for coming out of the closet. Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of double meaning, to that show. So all of our, like our grandparents' warnings about TV and the old time preachers, if you go back 50 years ago and you listen to the preachers, they have this thing called Sermon Archive. You can hear these guys saying, "Get that devil box out of your house." They were right,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as the influence in general of entertainment, you go back to the 1700s, way before TV. The liberals at that time, they were called the romantics. They were using media to push their propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
And so did the spiritists, starting in 1800s, somewhere around there. They used media to push it, right? Hitler used media to train his audience to hate other humans, right? What are the liberals of today? When I say liberals, I don't mean all liberals. I mean the far left, the neo-Marxists, cultural Marxists, those type of people. They have their tentacles in Hollywood so much. There are many conservatives in Hollywood, many, but they have tentacles so much. They have the power structure on lock through different bureaucratic agencies within Hollywood. They'll pay certain producers or whatnot to put in this alphabet people person in their show or this scene or whatever. They never need it, but they have to shoehorn them in. And what's also happening is, since so many feminists have taken over certain positions, they self-insert themselves into the writing, right? Whether it's Kathleen Kennedy or whoever else, right? And so they're using the platform to promote their junk. Disney just came out with a movie that was pro alphabet people, and it flopped because most of society doesn't want it. They know it's wrong. Even if they're not saved, they know it's wrong, right? And so they're trying to force it upon us, just like they try to force these gene therapies on us, right? And but the thing is that they're not all working in concert in humanity, but spiritually they are. I mean, there's a lot of infighting. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Like you said, this is just a primer. We've got to have you back on. Okay. We got to figure out how to do it. Our schedules are a little bit conflicting, but we covered a bunch of stuff, just kind of just throwing out this, and this, and you're throwing out these authors, these comic books, and we're aware of it. I want to ask you, and some of this is kind of obvious, but I want your take on this. What should be our response as Christians to this culture, to the superhero comic book culture, to this pagan culture? What should be our response?
I would say don't demonize. I have a daughter, what some Christian parents like to do is hammer. They're going to get out there and see it anyway. I'm not saying to allow pornography or some crazy in your home, but when it comes to like this stuff, what I do is I educate. If I see something on the screen without being too annoying, I'd be like, you know what that is? That's this, and that. And sooner or later, they'll catch on, Second, but this should be first, but second is never forget what the commission is preach the gospel of Jesus Christ in love, right? And so wherever we see evil, talk about it. Don't be scared, be bold, but never forget the commission. Because I've met Mormons, Catholics, and others that they could tell you some of the stuff I'm telling you right now, but they're not saved, right? So information is just information. The gospel is what saves.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can identify with that, Chris, because I'm having a lot of conversations with my son right now because he's exploring music.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to teach him about the spiritual dangers of these things without being too judgmental or too controlling. I'm trying to give him some freedom, but just really just, saying, bud, this is, check this out. What do you think about this? And this goes against, the God that we love, and it's a difficult thing because these things like comic books, Chris, you wanted to be an artist, and these things like music, it gets us, we connect to it emotionally. TV shows, I look back, with such fondness about the TV from the 80s, and I think it's the greatest shows ever. Then you go back and watch it and you're like, oh, it's not as good as I remember. It seemed like it was so cutting edge, right? But we just have this emotional connection, and the enemy, I think, knows this and can use this against us. So we have to be on guard, against these things and teach these things. I think that's a great answer that you gave.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Sometimes, how we here talking right now, we have a ton of knowledge, information. Other people don't, right? So sometimes we'll think that they're on our same level. I don't mean that arrogantly. I mean, like they just don't have the same amount of information. And we start talking to them. One guy said to me the other day, dude, everything you just said is over my head. And so I kind of toned it down, as we are the younger generation. They haven't been red pilled, enough in the spiritual to really get it. And then the older guys, they're just like, I never heard this stuff before. Right. And so the thing that I do is I follow what the Bible says about if they scoff. It says don't answer a scoffer. Don't do it. Right. And it's term I came up and said, I say people dance in the glory of their wisdom in ignorance because they don't have the wisdom they need, but they dance in it. Like, oh, I know this stuff, but they don't really know, And so
that's so true.
When they scoff, I just, I just take my time in love if they're willing to listen, especially if it's politically. And I just keep it simple. If they scoff, I don't answer. I leave it alone. Made my life better. But if you're willing to listen, here's the information.
No, I can agree with that so much. And if somebody has a question, I feel like we get them in a position where they're asking us questions, then we have them in a good position. When we're the ones kind of aggressively going towards them with information, their heart is not ready for what we want to give. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't deliver it anyway, but I mean, we have a job to do, and we have to give the gospel. But if it's not, who are we to know what kind of condition the soil is in? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I mean, obviously, sometimes we can tell, and there are, things that we can do. It's, Chris, it's why you do what you do with Don't Let Them Burn, and we do what we do with Through the Black. We feel that we have unique, angles on presenting these things, not only to the church, but to sinners as well, and, to the lost.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. A dynamic that everyone should consider if they're reading the Word of God. Some people ask, why won't these people just change? Why won't they just accept Christ? Listen, there are people in the book of Revelation that will never get saved. There are people in the Millennium Kingdom. When God's wrath is poured out in the 7-year tribulation, there are people that won't turn from their demon worship, their fornication, their drug abuse, and witchcraft. Right? They know it's God raining it down on them. They know there's no question. Their heart just won't turn. And so Christ comes back, we come back with him, and there's another the first resurrection is complete with the martyrs of this is in Revelation 20 if you want to fact check me. The martyrs get resurrected. It's in Revelation 20. And so the Millennium Kingdom gets ushered in, and then Satan is locked up for 1,000 years, The world is kind of regenerated to almost like Garden of Eden condition. We have harmony with animals. People are living long lives now, and Satan is released. And Jesus is literally on earth. You can't mistake what's going on here. There's no more devil. You can't say he did it to you. And millions, I don't know what the number is, but a lot of people turn on Jesus. He's right there. So that shows you how disgusting the sin nature is, how deep it goes. Just like how God's grace is just unlimited, the sin nature has no depth. No depth. And that's something to consider
No kidding.
when we think about the lost.
I want to give Vic a chance for making a final comment or question in a minute, but I have a question for you. If you were to address a young Chris Taylor who was interested in becoming an artist, a comic book artist, and I ask this question often, and it's often the same thing. We just kind of talked about it a little bit, but there are people out there that are listeners that have, the children and grandchildren that might be caught up in this type of stuff. I mean, you mentioned, we're not to come in judgmental or to be legalistic. Any other advice you would give somebody like a young Chris Taylor or, a parent or a grandparent or somebody that's, kind of caught up in the middle of this?
Yeah, it's so many dynamics to that based on how the person grew up, what has been programmed into their consciousness, But I'll just stick to me at back then. I probably would have listened because I was open to suggestion. I was open to leadership. I had no leadership, So if you're giving me something spiritual, I'm even if I don't listen, I'm going to listen, take it in, and maybe consider it. So somebody could have said to me, let's just say with the information we have now, hey, I don't know if Marvel is the right choice for you, but if you want to take that road, hone your skills, but be very spiritually prepared for what you're about to get into. Something like that, because there's so many different dynamics. Are you a boy or you're a girl, or are you a Muslim? All these different dynamics.
Right.
But God splits through all of that. And that's why the gospel is so more important than even career advice, because you have to learn that you are a sinner, and this is through your DNA and all that stuff, right? There's no way to escape it, but only one person can fix it, and he did that 2,000 years ago. That usually catches people off guard. So I would start the conversation and start teetering towards the gospel.
Amen. Vic?
So, Chris, I'm just wondering if you can give believers some maybe counsel on how do we watch television and movies to the glory of God, and especially as it pertains to like alpha and beta waves and how we're watching them. I understand that there's a lot of people that have gotten rid of their TVs, and I actually haven't had a TV for ages, but I'm still on YouTube and things like that. I kind of find that if we get rid of them completely, we're sort of losing our capacity to practice discernment. And I'm not saying go out and watch crappy, horrible, awful things that are going to be horrible and disturbing, but how, I want to sit down and watch a Netflix family-friendly movie with some kids I'm babysitting. How do I watch something to the glory of God?
I would say, because this is just from experience, the more you get into godly entertainment and your Bible, God will lead you to the rest. Listen, I used to be even as a Christian, a Walking Dead fan. Okay. Then I started talking about it on my program, and I denounced it, and And then one day I was like, wow, this episode's look interesting, And you know what God did? Convicted me. And I never watched it again. Okay. So it's the Spirit of the Lord that's going to lead you. Some of it, sometimes it takes God to kind of chip away at the stuff.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a major Star Wars fan, but I could care less about it now. It's the same thing when it comes to video games.
They fixed that on their own.
I know, right?
Yeah,
They saved me a lot of money, and they helped me a lot of time. So anyway,
yeah. So like even with the video games, I like video games. You know, I'll play some video games, but there's so much occult in all of them, even Call of Duty, that you can't escape it. So what do? You either pay more attention to God, try to see how you can serve Him, or you're going to pay attention to the world. And the Bible is explicit. Don't be a lover of this world. And that's not legalism right there. That's just what the Bible says.
Right.
So I know this can go down many different tiers of information or personalities or whatnot. Some people like to watch comedy, soap operas, whatever. Is it lining up with the Word of God? If Jesus was right next to you, would you watch it in front of Him? That is the acid test, because most of it is sinful.
There's a story that my mom likes to tell about my daughter, who's now going to be 23 in a couple months. But she was having a sleepover at my mom's house, at her grandma's house, and they were up late at night flipping through the channels, and the show, like, they were flipping through what's the Cartoon Network, Adult Swim was on late at night. And my daughter caught that, and she's like, well, what's that? I want to watch that. And my mom was like, well, Jesus wouldn't like us to watch that. And she's like, Jesus ain't here. So, okay. But I mentioned that because we have that mentality, right? We think that we can hide from God, and even if we could, it wouldn't be, safe for us, wouldn't be healthy for us, spiritually speaking. Right. Chris, we should have did this at the beginning. I forgot. We'll have all your links in the show notes. Please plug anything that you're doing. Your Don't Let Them Burn, your website, your YouTube channel, all that stuff. Let people know how they can find you, because, folks, we are just scratching the surface here with Chris. We have some shows with him in the archives, but we got to have you back on, my friend.
Oh, sure. You can find me at don'tletthemburn.com. I'm on most social media platform. If you want to support us, you can buy our shirts. You can give to our Patreon and other ways. I mean, we're all over the place, and we cover all sorts of topics from political to aliens and comic books, movies. As you can see there, you got spirit behind the music. There's so many topics that we cover, and Tom has been on my program a lot of times too. So, hey, just check us out. We have. I'm actually going to Bible college now. I'm working on a book, and it's called Hollywood Matrix: Cinema Decoded, and hopefully we'll have it out finally 2023.
Wow. Well, let us know when you do, because we want to help you get the word out about that. Yeah, amazing. Super cool stuff. Guys, one more thing about Don't Let Them Burn. Go check out it's not really a long interview, less than an hour, I think. The spirit behind the music was a great show, great interview. It's shocking stuff in there that was revealed, but a great expose. Chris, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us again. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. Always nice to be here.
Yeah. Hey, guys, we will catch you next time. God bless everybody. And bye.